Hi, Pamela. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
Sure, I'm good. I love London, I love England. Been here many times. It's always a thrill.
So, yeah, you're in London for your show on Friday. What can you tell us about that show?
Well, it's based on my first book. I'm with the band, and it's the glory days of rock and roll when Jim Morrison walked the streets and Zeppelin came to town in their private jet and I got to dance with Mick Jagger to Beggar's Banquet first time I heard it. Stuff like that. So it's like mythology now. And people enjoy hearing those stories because they really happened.
It
Yeah.
is a very eventful life you've lived. Where can people get a ticket if they want to go to the show on Friday?
Well, it's at the West Hampstead Arts Club, and it's on their website. It's also on my website, PamelaDesBarresOfficial.com, and you can just buy your ticket at the door too. It starts 6:30 is the VIP. I have a few of those tickets left, and 7:30 is the show.
Okay, nice. I'll leave a link to your website and the tickets and stuff in the description
Okay.
below.
Okay, great.
But like I said, it is a very eventful life you've lived. What was it like in the 60s and 70s in California and the Sunset Strip?
What was it like? Well, it's very hard to describe that, even in a half hour. It was, there were love-ins, there was hope in the air, there was the best music ever made, being made right in front of me every single night. I sort of lived at the Whiskey A Go Go. You could just walk into the club and sit down on Keith Moon's lap, or just dance in front of the Mothers of Invention, or on stage with them. I mean, it was a time never coming back. People have to view their rock stars, their rock gods, from a faraway place for a whole lot of money, and it's just different. It's the feeling in the air was so hopeful. It was a revolution. It was a sexual, spiritual, feminist, musical, every kind of revolution going on at once. And we just thought we were making a huge difference, and in some ways, I think we did, especially obviously musically, which is people are still trying to catch up with Captain Beefheart, for instance, the first rock star I really met, which was he's a wild character. If you guys don't know who Captain Beefheart is, look him up.
Um, do you know, like now with social media, obviously this is like the 60s and 70s we're talking about, but you want it to be up close to the artists and stuff. Do you think with social media, like that mystery and stuff of these musicians has gone these days?
Well, yes, for sure. Although there are still groupies and there always will be, and they do meet on social media now. It's not like it used to be, of course. It's much better to meet people first in person. But yeah, it's different. It's different. MTV started taking away the mystery of rock and roll, I think. But of course, there was a plus side to it. People got to see them move around. I remember when Hard Day's Night came out. I was only a kid. I was 14, but it was a life-changing thing to see the Beatles, who you'd only seen them on record covers, to see them move around and talk and wow, they're living beings. But of course, that was a very different time.
You know, when you like say you're a big fan of music since you were young, when you did get like backstage and in this inner circle, was it how you
Mhm.
expected it to be?
I really didn't have expectations. I just wanted to live in the moment, in the reality that I imagined existed, which it did, and I became very friendly with a lot of these musicians. Musicians that people will revere from now on. It was, but I just happened to be the right age, right city, right time, right everything to be in the middle of that whole maelstrom of magnificent music being made, and just also women were starting to come into our own in America, And I sort of led the pack in ways. I like I took the birth control pill in public, you know, and just showed my independence, women's independence. We can do what we want. We can do what we want. And that was now, you know, 50 some years ago, 56 years ago when I started hanging, maybe 60. Yeah. I was 16 when I started hanging out on the strip. I'm now 76, even though the Metro said I was 78 this week.
So, like you mentioned, the Beatles when they were where you were living, playing where you were living, you tried to get close to the house they were staying at. What is
Yeah.
what is the craziest thing you've done to get close to a rock star?
Well, that's it. That's it. And I was too young. I was 14, so I didn't know, when I got older, I just went to the Sunset Strip and said hi to these people. They were walking around. It was a very different situation then. You could meet them very simply if you were just, an attractive girl on the strip. It was a way different matter just in 2 years, because in '64 when the Beatles came, no one, phenomenon no one has ever experienced. Maybe Elvis would be the only other, close to it. But yeah, I was so young. I decided if Paul saw me, he would fall in love with me. I just knew that, right? He was my favorite. So we got to Bel Air, where they had rented a house because the Beverly Hills Hotel found out they were the Beatles and wouldn't let them stay. So at the last minute, they had to rent a house. And of course, it was announced on the radio, sort of where it was, and we found it. Me and my other three, we all had to like a different Beatle, or we couldn't be friends. So, so we met Jerry Lewis's. Probably a lot of your listeners don't even know who he is, but was a very famous movie star at the time. We met his son, who was a young guy too, 14, and talked him into letting us walk through his dad's backyard around to the Beatles' backyard. And we spent the night there. Our parents must have been losing their minds. Of course, they were. I found out later, but I got in big trouble. But we spent the night and kept waiting for the Beatles to come out and see us there behind the chain link fence, which never happened.
You mentioned Elvis there. Is it right you turned down a date with Elvis?
I never met Elvis, but I got to see him play twice. I went once with Led Zeppelin. I was seeing Jimmy Page at the time, and he took me to Vegas to see Elvis. Robert Plant came with us, so I was sitting in the front row watching Elvis in his black leather, in between Robert and Jimmy. It just seems like people go, how could that be? I mean, it does sound like a rock and roll fairy tale, my life. So it is like a rock and roll fairy tale. And at the show, I tell that story. I read out of the book, and wherever that piece I'm reading takes me, I just tell a story about it. I show photos of me with these people, and you know, all kinds of photos from the era, and play little snippets of music um, from people I hung out with, and my band. I had a band, the GTOs, that Frank Zappa produced.
We'll go to GTO soon, but like you mentioned there, you're the queen of groupies, the world's most famous groupie. You hung around with a lot of rock stars and were romantically involved with them. Mick Jagger, Keith Moon, Jimmy Page. Who have you got the fondest memories of?
Huh, well, I really have the fondest memories of someone who was just a friend. Graham Parsons.
Yeah.
Familiar with Graham? He's my favorite singer. A lot of people think it should be someone else, but Graham Parsons was the most emotional singer I've ever seen. And he became a very good friend. I was seeing his best friend at the time, Chris Hillman, who was in the Birds. I met Chris in the Birds, and when he got Graham and did the Flying Burrito Brothers, I was at every show. I was at every single show. And I have the fondest memories of him because he was the most sincere. He created what is now called country rock. He and Hillman, with the Flying Burrito Brothers, created what is now country rock. He called it cosmic American music. and changed everything. I mean, there would be no Eagles, there would be no so many bands, so many singer songwriters stemmed from that band.
Well, you mentioned Graham. Then there's like Jim Morrison, Keith Moon, Jimi Hendrix. All these people have passed on now. Do you know when you're hanging around with those people, can you see like the way it's going to end for them?
Well, certainly for Keith Moon, yeah, he was a hard living guy, but a very he had a split personality, really. He was never mean or anything, but he was often very, very sad, uh, up and down, you know. Now he would be bipolar. He would be considered bipolar. But yeah, everything was an extreme. So, and he just took every kind of drug anyone handed him. And, you know, it was hard to keep up with him, although I did. Whenever one time we spent 2 whole weeks together at the Century Plaza Hotel. He was kicked out of every hotel, so he finally got into the Century Plaza. It's a long story, but after those 2 weeks, I had to go home and stay with my mother for a while.
What to
I got
recover?
really sick. I got like strep throat. I don't know how. And he just went on and carried on doing that until he died at 31. And it's amazing he even got that to that age, I think.
Well, did he like wake up in the middle of the night screaming and stuff?
Yes, yes, he had a guilt thing. He felt guilty about that's another long story. Just but yes, he would wake up and I'd have to calm him. I had a really good I could calm Keith Moon somehow. My energy, I have a gentle kind of energy with people and I was able to calm him down in the middle of the night.
Would you be on stage with a band sometimes when they were playing live?
Oh yeah.
What
Hmm.
band were they?
Well, the Zeppelin movie just came out. It's really fantastic. Becoming Led Zeppelin. Have you seen it?
I've not seen it yet, but I'm gonna. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. You can spot me standing on stage. I didn't. I went to the premiere, but I didn't see myself. But then someone sent me a picture that they took off the TV screen because it's now streaming. And I said, "Yeah, that's me." I was I was standing there in the back. So I was on stage with Zeppelin quite a bit. I don't think they even allow that anymore. But back and the Stones too. I got to stand on stage with the Stones, so I was close enough for them to sweat on me. You know, it was something that just doesn't happen anymore. So I think that's why people are fascinated with my tales and why I'm with the band is has been in print for 37 years and I have several other books that I wrote after that. So it's given me a career.
You were a fan of music first and foremost. What are some of your favorite musical moments that you were there for?
Well, the live Zeppelin stuff, you know, I remember once sitting on Jimmy's amplifier, and just so my point of view to the audience was like their point of view. I could see and feel what they were seeing and feeling, which was unbelievably overwhelming. What that felt like, all that love coming from the audience, you know. Whoa, sorry about that.
Nice.
All that love, all that love coming from the audience, that was spectacular. Also, you know, seeing Mick so close on stage in 1969, you know, the sympathy for the devil, stuff like that. I'll never ever forget because, you know, that's what people want. They wish they'd been there doing that, the things I was doing. So, yeah, I have a lot of great musical moments. I spent a lot of time with Frank Zappa and his family and the Mothers of Invention. There must be a fire somewhere. and and that was always great. I was on stage with the Mothers. I danced on stage with the Mothers of Invention a lot. And Frank produced our album. That's one of my highlight musical. You know, I wrote the songs with the other girls, and Frank loved them and he produced them, and we had people on the record. We had Jeff Beck and Rod Stewart, and Lowell George co-produced it. So it was pretty amazing to have to do our own record.
How do you look back at GTOs and the album?
How do I look back at it?
Yeah, that time with the group. Yeah, yeah.
Well, we had high hopes to be the first all-girl groupie group. We hung out with a lot of bands. The bands loved us. They would come to town and look us up because we were pretty notorious girls. And I thought maybe it would go on forever. It lasted a couple of years, and a lot of it had to do, sadly, with the drugs that the girls were taking. And when they got arrested, two of them got arrested for hard drugs, and Frank was very upset. He didn't take drugs. He didn't believe in them. Didn't take them, and that's when he broke the group up, and that was devastating. But I continued to be, a Zappa family member. Really, I mean, I was the governess for the kids, off and on for years, and I was in 200 Motels, his movie, and I'm still really close with Moon and Ahmet, and I wrote a lot of liner notes for the re-releases, and so the GTOs was a very important time for me. Girls Together outrageously, and I keep begging Ahmet to re-release it. It hasn't been re-released. Well, it was re-released on CD many years ago, but it's hard to find now.
Yeah, it's not on Spotify. I heard it on YouTube.
No. Yeah, you can hear it on YouTube, but
Um, so did you get your own groupies then in that group?
oh yeah. Well, actually, some of the rock stars were our groupies. We were groupies for each other. Uh, we took them shopping. I remember taking Rod Stewart to the first vintage clothing store in LA. Now that's just everybody wants to wear vintage, of course, and have for a long time. But there was only one vintage store. It was called the Glass Farmhouse, and we took Rod Stewart there, and he bought a feather boa and some other stuff too. But he bought his first feather boa there. That's those are the days when men dressed really great, colorful, especially the Brits, really colorfully, just almost like women in a way. They were very androgynous. The British rock stars, the Kinks, the Who, the way they dressed themselves, the Faces, the way they dressed themselves. It made them even more approachable. The androgyny. You felt like, oh, I could hang out with that guy. He's got on a velvet jacket.
The fashion was as important as the music, and you were really into the
Yeah.
fashion, didn't you? Like sometimes dress the bands up and stuff.
Yes, we helped. We took Zeppelin also to the Glass Farmhouse, and they bought a bunch of stuff. And then I worked at Nudi's Rodeo Taylor for a very short time because he chased me around the saddle in the dressing room. But I brought Led Zeppelin there too. And when you see there's when you look at Zeppelin through the ages, you see they went through a country and western phase, and that was
Yeah.
when I took them to Nudi's. Even in Jimmy Page's book, his recent book out a couple years ago, he's got his clothes in there because he was quite a fashionista. And one of the shirts I made him, the velvet, pink and white velvet with the 3 foot fringe, it's in his book.
Did you enjoy that
I'm
then?
glad he saved that.
Did you enjoy styling the band sometimes then?
Yes, of course I did. I enjoyed everything back then. Everything was an adventure and a trip, and you never knew what was going to happen. It was anything can happen day, every single day.
You mentioned it was like a brilliant time, but did you have any low moments as a groupie?
Well, yeah, I had my heart broken, a couple times, but we all do. It's just I just happened to have it broken by rock stars. But yeah, of course, just like anybody, there are low moments, but nothing terrible ever happened to me. It was mostly really a whole lot of fun. And that's
Yeah.
what the show I don't go through much heartbreak in the show because I want to uplift people. So I read the parts of the book which are, joyous and fun and funny. Some of the stuff is really funny in retrospect. I didn't mean to write it as funny, but it is funny.
It is a brilliant book. But
Oh, thank you.
do you still do the tours in? Is it California where you go around doing the rock tour?
Yeah, I do rock and roll tours in Hollywood, Laurel Canyon, Hollywood, and I take them to all. It's a personal tour because it's based on I'm with the band, and I take them to the places where all these things happen to me there. Jim Morrison's old house, Zappa's old house, the Burritos' old house, and the Strip, and all kinds of different places where and then I read out of the book for them too.
Is that the Jim Morrison's house where you first heard the Doors' first album and you stuck into the house?
Yeah, yes, yes, yeah. I had a wild time, Ethan.
Did you first, were you the first one of the first people to hear Led Zeppelin 2 as well?
Yes, I was. I was seeing Jimmy at the time, and he would stay with me at my apartment sometimes instead of the hotel. And he brought the test pressing of Led Zeppelin 2 over and played it on my little record player over and over and over again. See, he didn't like the order of the songs. He didn't like, something wasn't right. And he wound up actually changing the the list of songs from what the original test pressing had. And I had to sit, I mean, I loved it, but I had to sit and listen to that for hours. And Robert Plant came over. He wanted him to weigh in on it. It was Jimmy's band, but he wanted Robert's opinion that day about how the record should go. So he left the test pressing with me and all those notes that he wrote down. And I did the dumb thing when we broke up of selling it for $50. God only knows what that thing is worth now.
Crazy about it now. Crazy amount. I wonder who's got it now.
I know, I wonder. I'm sure whoever that was wound up making a pretty penny on it.
Either that or they're sitting on a lot of money that they don't know about.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's possible. I remember we had a newspaper called The Recycler, and I just put it in the recycler for $50. Someone came and got it.
Have you kept any like things from back then that you've still got?
Not so much because, I was a hippie. I had various ways of making a living. I made shirts. I made them first for Chris and Graham. Then I started making them and selling them. And the GTOs got paid a certain amount every week. But yeah, I was always trying to, make a living as a young woman. And I sold so much of my stuff. Yeah. I do share at the shows a couple pieces of clothing that I've had all these years. And people always, ooh, I showed the dress I wore in the Foxy Lady video with Jimi Hendrix. I kept that one. But there's a lot of fun surprises at the show. I wish you could be there.
I know it's a shame it's down in London. Are you ever thinking of taking it like um around England in other places?
I don't know how I would do that. I do everything myself. I
Oh,
book
really?
myself. I do it all myself. So I wouldn't even know how to do that. I did some readings for this gentleman, Terry, who runs the West Hampstead Arts Club. And when he opened this new pub, it just seemed like the best place for me to do it. So I did it last year. I sold it out in November 23, and I'm hoping to do that now with your help. I appreciate you interviewing me for that
No, no worries.
possibility.
It's been brilliant to speak to you. But just to finish off, you did actually get a bit of backlash when you released the book, didn't you? When it first came out.
Oh yeah.
What was
There
that
was
like? Was that a shock?
Yeah, I didn't know what was going to happen, and I didn't know anyone was even going to read it. When you write a book, especially your first one, you have no idea what's going to happen. Yeah, I was surprised I had a backlash, and it was just misogynistic crap, especially back then in '87 when it came out. Um, it was still a lot of anti-woman stuff going on. There still is. In fact, it's getting worse again, but we won't go there. But at the time, yes, of course, I was called all kinds of names when that came out on national TV. The first show I did was a huge show in America called The Today Show. And the host introduced me as Queen of the Groupies, which is not, I did not know, I didn't know that about myself. And I was also, I think I opened a lot of doors for people, unknown people, to write their memoir because no one was writing, no one thought anyone would care about a nobody's memoir, right? So, but now everybody's doing it, and it started a trend. I think it helped start a trend for sure, and I'm really glad I was able to do that. Then I wrote another memoir, and I'm writing my third one now, and I have several other books too.
Yeah, you've got how many books have you got out so far? Is it five or six?
Six,
Six, yeah,
and
yeah.
there's another one coming out soon too. I worked with Tom Petty's wife, Jane Petty, and my third memoir, which I'm working on now.
Like I say, I'll leave a link in the description below if anybody'd like to check out your page or to get tickets. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me. It's been brilliant to speak to you.
Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you. Enjoy staying in England as well.
I will.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye, bye.
Bye.